Tuned into Pigeon World Podcast, #1. We taking over, the takeover. Frank, the homers, man. How did you get into homers?
Well, like many of us, I actually started with fantail pigeons, but
Great.
my original thing were I had chickens as a little kid. Like even before school, I had chickens and ducks because I remember taking my first grade class and the girl I had a crush on home to see my ducks, and I had them a while. But
Okay.
one day we were visiting a farm and trying to look for a new chicken. I lived in the city of Quincy, right outside of Boston, and my father liked the chickens. We were
Oh, okay.
looking for new chicken or a new chicken or chickens, and I saw a pair of fantail pigeons. So
Mm.
my father bought me the pair, and over the next few years, they reproduced in my chicken coop. So I went from 2 to maybe 12 to 14 fantails, and
Wow.
then one day I walked in, I said, "Oh, these fantails, they're overrunning my chicken coop, and I'm going to let some of them out." So I let 3 or 4 of them out, and they bounced around house to house, and then they landed back in the yard. I opened the door of the chicken coop, and they walked in, and I was like, "Wow, this is unbelievable." And my father came home from work. I told him the story. He goes, "Oh, I knew a guy with homing pigeons. You might like those." And another guy in the city he knew had racing pigeons at the time. And my father just thought they were homing pigeons. And we visited him, and I saw the clock and the nest boxes and the red checkers, and that was it.
Oh, wow.
We gave away the chickens, the pigeons came, and so I got my first homing pigeons. I was probably 10, 11. I started racing at 12. And the rest is
Wow.
history. 50 years later, I'm still doing it.
Wow. God
Wow.
bless you.
That's
Wow.
right.
Definitely. So growing up, having racing pigeons, did you have any mentors that teach
Ye-
you
Yeah, well, it's
how to?
funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
right from the beginning, I told my cousin, who was like my best friend, that I had these homing pigeons, these racing pigeons. And he goes, "Oh, there's a guy in my neighborhood that has pigeons." And he lived in Weymouth. I lived in Quincy. So we went to visit, and he marched me into the backyard of his neighbor. And it was Vinny Sharaffa, who still races to this day. And Vin Sharaffa, he's a terrific fancier. And he was my mentor as a young kid. He took me under his wing. And, I thought he was old then. I was probably 11 and he was 32. But, he was a young man. And we've been buddies, ever since, and he's still a top fancier. But he was my mentor as a kid, and then as I got a little older, Tony Malucci, which was a very famous U.S. fancier, famous for going to Belgium and around the world also. But then he was a mentor later on, like in through my 20s and 30s. Traveling to Belgium and Holland with Tony was a great experience, and he was a super mentor for me also.
Nice. So at a young age, you traveled a lot. You traveled a
Yeah,
lot with the pigeons. That's great.
Tony took me to Belgium. I was 27 the first time. And
Wow.
I lost it. I went crazy when I saw those pigeons, those lofts, and I
It blew
just
your mind.
it
Wow.
blew me away. I went from being pigeon crazy to really being pigeon nuts. I mean, I was obsessed. I started buying all these European birds, and yeah, it,
Wow.
it took a whole new level when I went. That was more of a smaller level fancier. I had great success, but that opened my eyes to, like, the best fanciers in the world. And so
Wow.
I traveled to Belgium a lot for pigeons over the years.
I have a good
Nice.
question for you, Frank. Um, since you traveled around the world and you had your chance to experience every uh every aspect of the racing world and the birds and stuff like that, in your opinion, where would you say your best racers derived from?
Well, most of my best racers, they come down from Belgian pigeons, like birds that I bought
Mm-hmm.
probably through the 90s, and some of my very best pigeons, some of them, early 2000s. But the groups of birds that are in my bloodlines right now, I selected in Belgium probably back in the 90s. So
Mm.
a lot of those
Okay.
birds are still important for me. I mean, Belgium, in the racing pigeon world, Belgium is the mecca. They have the
That's
best
right.
pigeons in the world. There's great pigeons everywhere. America has super pigeons. Everywhere has super pigeons, but no place brings the prices or has that aura or mystique as those Belgian pigeons. You know, everybody wants the
Absolutely.
Belgian birds. So
Yeah,
Absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, if
yeah.
you look at how they house them over there, they
Oh,
have their lofts look better than their houses. Come on, you know what I mean?
yeah, I was amazed the first time you see it. Like I was, I had a 12 by 16-foot loft, and that's after my father put an addition on it. And I thought, I had a good loft for the
Hmm.
city and in, outside of Boston. But when you go there and you see just the whole yard is lined with pigeon lofts
Hmm.
as far as you can see. Really amazing stuff.
You're like, I
It,
just got a shed.
Yeah, yeah. I was about to say that. I was about to say that.
it's funny. I mean, a lot of us, I mean, that's, I have big lofts now. After going to Belgium, I lost it. And in around 91, I kind of talked my mother and father into buying a property out in the country, and I really could expand the pigeon business. So
Nice.
I just went kind of, bigger time after that. But, Belgium, after seeing that, it messed me up. I was hooked.
I have a question for you. How much protein should a homer should have daily
Well,
on a
with
daily
me,
basis?
for raising babies, they should be somewhere between, you know, 14 to 17% protein to raise really nice babies. Now, for racing, the biggest mistake people make, and I'm sure you'd find it with those fancy birds, are people that are into the high flyers and rollers and stuff. They feed too high protein. So for racing, I'm probably feeding 10, 11% protein. I'm trying to keep them very buoyant, not a lot of fat, more so like a carbs with fiber. I use a lot of barley, but they don't need a lot of protein. They really don't, the racing birds. And
Mm,
after a race, though, that's when I load them up with the protein and fats. Like after a big workout, the most important
mhm.
meal is that first meal after a big workout. So that's when I load them back up, let them replenish. But after that, they're pretty much on a lower fat, lower protein diet to race.
And is it the same during breeding?
With breeding, I load them up. I just fill the feeders and
Load
they
'em up.
can eat whatever they want. Yeah.
Yeah, you whatever they want.
I don't want to take a chance of stunting the babies. You guys all know how fast they grow. So
Yes.
I have the feed in front of them, 24/7. And then I have the lights on this time of year so they can feed the babies, 24 hours a day. So I'm raising
Yeah.
some really, really nice babies.
Nice. Nice.
Nice. What is your opinion on pedigrees?
I mean, important, but I like to see a lot of champions in a pedigree. I find the best pigeons have like many unrelated champions in the pedigree, not like inbred or closely bred pigeons, but a lot of just, the grandfather was a champion, the great grandfather, the grandmother on this side, all these superstars. So I use the pedigrees to really see a lot of performance pigeons, because performance is the name of the game. Too many people in the race and pigeon world are collectors. They want, like,
Hmm.
they'd rather have, grandson of some or great grandson of some famous bird, but
Hmm.
there's no performance between the famous bird and their bird. So yeah, I use pedigrees to look at the performance of the family more or less.
Be it that there's so much how can I put it, forgeries and stuff like that these days. How would you be able to recognize a solidified, genuine paperwork on that bird
That's
as to oppose as to a fake?
Yeah, that's so true, because anybody can put whatever they want on that piece of paper. So right now they're doing a lot of DNA testing in the high-end pigeons. So when you buy a pigeon, you get DNA off the mother and the father. So at least the parents, it is the baby of those parents. So there's a lot of
Okay.
DNA in the high-end racing pigeons. But people can, it's just paper. There's sometimes you never know. And
Mm-hmm.
what you see many times on a pedigree, they'll put the grandfather's performance, and then they'll put the same performance under the father, because they'll say like father did, and then the grandson will have the same performance. So it looks like it's full of performance, but it was only one pigeon's record that they keep putting all the way down the pedigree. So you have to look close occasionally with the paperwork.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good hint right there. I appreciate that.
And loft cleaning. How often should you clean your loft?
Well, with me, I'm busy, and a lot of what I do is for people that don't have time. Like, I have a lot of success, but I don't have a lot of time for my own birds. I don't live at the lofts. So with my race team, I clean the racing loft every Saturday morning before the race. So weekly. It's dry, it's not like it's perfectly dry, but some people are in there scraping droppings as quick as the birds can poop them out, but that's not me. I don't have time for that. And so my racing lofts are cleaned weekly. And then my breeding lofts, like, I'll clean around the nest bowls as it builds up a few times while the baby's growing over a 3 or 4 week period, maybe weekly too. I'll clean around the nest bowls. I'm not too fanatical about the cleaning. I think that a lot of the natural immunity the birds get are from the droppings, from the other birds, from the deep litter. So I use a deep litter system with my breeders. I use wood pellets that they burn in the wood burning stoves. I'll put a layer of wood pellets, and then it mixes with droppings. It kind of breaks down, and then I'll take out the clumps and clean around the nest boxes. But I'm not crazy with the cleaning. As long as the lofts are dry and the birds are healthy, that's good enough
The
for me.
wood pellets, they're good at absorbing.
Yeah, they really absorb very well. Buy the ones made for the wood stoves, because the ones made for animals, they break down too quick.
Too quick. Buy the
Yeah.
ones that are made for the wood stoves.
Yeah, I buy them
Okay.
at Tractor Supply, whatever the cheapest. They might be like $6 a bag, and I figure one bag will cover about an 8x8 if you spread it around. Then they break down, and they make a lot of bedding, the wood pellets. But I do like the wood pellets.
I'm a fanatic with scraping.
Yeah,
I gotta. If I don't scrape, I feel like I didn't clean right. It's
that's
just
funny.
me. Yeah,
No, but
I
I
got.
mean, it's funny that my mentor, Vinny Sharafa, growing up, boy, his lofts were just spotless. I mean, you couldn't even find a dropping in those lofts when I visited him. I always felt, I was kind of disappointed in my own lofts because I never could keep them that clean. But yeah, whatever you like. But
Definitely.
I wish I had more time. And maybe if I had more time, I would clean a little more. But I run to the lofts in the morning, and then I'm gone for the rest of the day. I work from my own home, but my pigeons are about 10 minutes from where I live.
Vaccines.
Yes.
Do you use vaccines on your birds?
Yeah, it's super important. I mean, I vaccinate in the racing pigeon world. They're finding that the rotavirus is the root of all young bird sickness. So most of the vets, the consensus is to vaccinate them when they're babies for PMV and rotavirus. So now we've all been doing that, PMV and rota at weaning, and then I might follow up with a PMV and a salmonella. I like the combination vaccines, and
Yes.
I kind of switch companies. I'll switch the different vaccines, but yeah, it's so important. I know a lot of people haven't experienced PMV, paramyxovirus, and if you haven't vaccinated and you get hit with PMV, you're going to lose all your birds. It spreads like crazy. It'll be a heartbreak. And
If, yes, I know. You'll
yeah,
have one day. The next day you open up the coop, they're all upside down.
yeah, I
I have
have,
experienced it.
oh, I have my barn where I keep my pigeons for my auction business. It's like 10 minutes from my pigeon lofts where my parents lived. My brother has a house on the property, and someone sent me a few fancy birds 7, 8 years ago to export for him. And I had them 3 or 4 days, and all of a sudden one of them, the head started spinning around, and I was like, oh no. So then a few more got it, and luckily the other birds were vaccinated, so I didn't have a problem. But within 3 weeks, I had like 10 late breds at the other location in different lofts around the yard. Some of them were 50, 60 yards apart. Every late bred that I didn't vaccinate got PMV. And they weren't even on the same property as the birds that had the PMV. And I had to carry it over on my shoes or on my clothes or something. But that's how scary PMV is. And you'd be surprised, even in the racing pigeon world, some people don't vaccinate, and it's crazy. You
Yeah.
really have to. You
And
take a big one.
how old should a young one be when you vaccinate?
Well, I vaccinate them when I wean them. That's when when I wean them, and some are weaned a little young. I tend to wean on the weekends when I have more time, so I'll wean what's ever ready. Some probably could have been weaned a week before. Some maybe should have waited 2 or 3 days, but maybe 28 days old. I'm vaccinating them when I wean them.
Okay. What's some of your favorite colors of racing homers?
It's funny. When I was a kid, the first
Like,
ones I was drawn to were the red checks and the mealies. The person we visited in Quincy, his name was Fred Padula, and he had I saw these red checkers with the black flecks and stuff. And I've always favored the reds and the mealies. And, it's just a color but for me, I've always liked those probably the best, color wise. And the problem is, I think maybe with most of my birds are blue checkers and blue bars, and the odd colored ones tend to be selected by the hawks early on. So it's hard to keep the odd colored ones. So if I have a nice red or mealy, it's difficult.
Listen, he's bright in the sky. He's going to die.
Bright in the
Yeah,
sky.
I
Bright
say
in the
now
sky,
you
gonna
want them
die.
when you're playing with the racing pigeons, you want them to blend in. You're better off with blue checkers and blue bars. No whites, no grizzles, no. I mean,
I
we
was
all
big
love
on
them,
the
but
pies.
yeah, they're pretty. But now any oddballs at my pigeon lofts, that's the one the hawk singles out usually, the grizzle or the pied or the red. So more often than not, those are the ones that disappear.
With the black eagle birds, what do you think of those birds? What is your opinion on them?
Yeah, I never had any. I mean, they were popular years ago when I was a kid, the South African black eagles. I love the looks of them, the black pigeons, but yeah, I'm not really familiar with them too much. I never had any. Yeah.
Wow, so you've never had really any black homers in the loft?
I've had some black homers, but not the black eagles.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So not of that
bloodline.
strain. Okay, got you. But do the blacks do the ones you have? Do they do good in the
Oh
races?
yeah, I've got some really that are dark. Like I have the Steph Van Reed pigeons, and they're like a speed pigeon, and they breed. I've got some brick reds, but they'll breed some blacks that are really black or black pies. But yeah, they're terrific. I mean, the blacks have been really good for me over the years too. But they're not. They're not like under the wing is still, they're really dark and black, but maybe under the wing is still gray. Some of those blacks, they're black everywhere. You lift up the wing, it's black, everything's black. But mine aren't quite like that.
I grew up with my dad raising only blacks.
Wow.
That's all he wanted. He started with a black eagle homer.
Oh,
okay. He bought that from a poultry market.
Is that right? You hear a lot of those stories where someone gets a champion pigeon, just by luck. And
listen, my brother right there was telling me the same thing. That's the secret.
A lot of the old timers, when I was a kid, I'm talking about 30, 40 years ago, you see all the old timers taking their old breeders, and they get out their car and they looking around, and they walk in the poultry market with a big carrier with like 50, 30 birds in it. And you see them go inside, and you walk inside, and they look at you to see if you know about pigeons or anything. And you just mind your business, buy a chicken and take home and eat. And you hear them telling the guy, I'm going to sell you these, but I don't want you to sell these to anybody. I need these birds to never get out of here and nobody get their hands on.
Yeah.
And they used to sell some of their good birds there. So you always get a good bird at a chicken market.
Yeah, I believe it.
They don't want nobody to have their hands on them. So,
Frank,
the Spanish guys that work at the market, you tell them, look, I'll take that bird and I'll give you 3 or 4 tipplers. And they'd be like, well, I'm getting 3 or 4 extra for one. Let's do this behind the back door.
Yeah.
And they'll throw you 2 or 3 homers.
One of the great racing pigeons of all time, it was this super crack pigeon, the super crack croissant of Robert Venus bought the bird. It was a double national winner. And when Croissant, or some people say Gruson, got out of the pigeons, everybody picked over the birds, and there was one ugly pigeon left over, and nobody wanted it. So the person that took it didn't race it as a youngster, raced it as an old bird. It ended up being like a double national winner and an only day bird. But it was one of those pigeons that nobody wanted, that turned out to be just like an incredible superstar. And one of the most famous breeding hens of all time, Sissy of Ad Shellakins, was a Gabby Vendinabila hen. And again, she was so ugly and just there was nothing to her, and he couldn't sell her. And then somebody bought her and returned her. And then she went on to have like a legacy of champions down from her. So
Wow.
you just never know sometimes until you try them. You
Absolutely.
really you don't know. I mean, you can pick the pretty ones, but there's a lot of in
That
I kind of laugh.
that goes to the next question. That what you say right now goes to my next question to you, which is how by eye do you recognize the perfect racing pigeon?
Yeah, well, it's funny. When I was younger, and I would say eye sign was just, the guys were crazy. Like when I was just a teenager, and there were those eye sign experts, and they'd have the jeweler's loop, and they're studying the eye, and yeah, this is a good one, this is a bad one. But as the time went by, and I was into it, and when I started going to Belgium in the late 80s, if you like looked at eye sign or something, they laugh at you over there, and they were the best in the world. So I got away from it, and I started not paying any attention to it. Now I like rich colored eyes. I like a lot of like definition and depth in the eye, but you can't really select a champion by the eye. And one of the greatest breeders I ever saw, well, it was this Invincible Montauban pigeon. It was a Cassat bird bought by Silvatoya in Belgium. And I went to visit, and I handled the bird. I touched the bird, and it was electric. It was like, there's been 5 or 10 birds in my lifetime that I just touched, and they were just better than anything else I had ever seen. And I held him up, and I looked at his eye, and it was an orange eye with a pupil, like the worst eye you'd ever want to see in your life. And it went on to breed all kinds of champions. But what I do with eyes, I'll take a bird and I'll bring it out. Like with the homers, they got to race in the sun for 10, 12, 14 hours. So I'll bring it out in the sun, even a little baby, 25, 28 days old. And I want that pupil to get tiny in the sun, because if that pupil gets tiny, that thing can fly in the sun all day. But a lot of them, you bring them in the sun, the pupil stays huge.
I
And
do.
they're not going to be able to, I'm sure with the fancy birds, if you're doing high flyers or something and they're going to be in the sun all day, you got to make sure that pupil, I think it's more important that the pupil can, I guess it's constrict way down small. That's a good way to see the strength of the eye.
Okay. But so the bird you described that you said you only had a few in your hand, right?
Yes.
Can you describe what you felt?
Well, some of them have a feather quality that's like, it's so soft and so silky. It's like my birds have great feather quality, and it's genetics. You can't give them seeds or bats or anything. Feather is born. It's in the genetics. Like some birds have great feather quality, but then some of these champions have a whole nother level of feather quality. It's so soft. It's so silky. And then they have a muscle texture that's different. It's got a different feel. Like I know that when I feel this certain muscle texture, those birds are the great ones. And now there's a lot of good pigeons and a lot of good birds with muscle, but there's the real national champions, the best birds of the country. They all have a certain muscle texture. And I can almost like, I could just put my fingers over them and just touch them like that, and you can feel the quality. You don't have to pick up the bird. You can just, by touching them, you can feel the quality of these superstars. And yeah, there's been some great pigeons that I've seen over the years that as soon as I touch them, I'm like, wow, this thing is unbelievable. And you realize I've been lucky enough to travel to Belgium and handle some of the best birds in the world, or the best birds in the world. And there's some are just better than others. They're just on a whole nother level of anything
What
that we're used to.
What are your thoughts on the most expensive bird in the world, Armando?
Yeah. I mean, to see those numbers, I think it's nuts. I can't imagine, people spending $1 million for a pigeon. And I've been saying for years, it's like a piece of art with an expiration date. Like the people that buy these birds,
Mm,
they want to own them. They have the money, they want to own the best, but you're only going to own it for a short time because it's not going
mm-hmm.
to live forever. So it definitely
That's
has an
right.
expiration date. And the numbers have gone crazy in the last 20 years for racing pigeons. And
Wow.
when I first started going to Belgium, they were very inexpensive. And 20 years ago, I bought from, like, at the time, he was the best breeder in Belgium. He was called the Cannibal. And I bought from the Cannibal in 2003, and I paid €750 for his baby. If he was alive today, they'd be €50,000 a piece for his babies. That's how much the prices for the best birds have gone
Mm.
crazy.
I heard of that bird. I
The
heard of that bird.
Cannibal, yeah.
Yes, I heard
Yeah,
of that bird.
very famous superstar breeder. But in the last 20 years, racing pigeon prices have gone nuts. But I don't want to discourage people. Like if someone's getting in the sport, I mean, I give them good pigeons, and even a lot of people will help. And you can buy great birds for $200 or $300. But if you want to buy a son of like these famous, highly promoted birds, you're going to pay, like a child of Armando, you're probably going to pay €5,000 or something like that.
Mm.
Mm.
Um,
And what's the difference between the and the hobby from the 70s up to date?
Well, what I saw, and what I do in my YouTube channel and I promote is, in the 70s, we didn't use any medications or anything. And
Yes.
the birds stayed healthy naturally. We gave them some vitamins once in a while. You might have treated them for coccidiosis once a year. You'd worm them maybe once or twice a year. That was it. And you never lost any. You would race them. So the immune systems were stronger. And that's why the last 11 years, I haven't flock treated my birds with anything. I'll treat them individually, but I won't flock treat them. Breeding, racing, only natural products. So in the 70s, the immune systems were stronger, but the birds were so much slower. Like today, the pigeons are incredible. Like if I had the birds I own today back in the 70s or 80s and even the 90s, nobody would touch me. They're so much faster. They're just a different animal. They're so athletic. We never have slow races anymore. Back in the 70s and 80s, the races were all, fairly moderate speeds. Now
Dragging.
it doesn't matter what the winds are, headwinds, tailwinds, those birds are making some good speeds. I mean, the
To
birds
make
are,
it some good piece.
yeah, they're really good today. The pigeons are
Nice.
exceptional today compared to,
Nice.
but the immune systems were better then. The pigeons themselves are better today.
Nice. Elaborate a little more on the natural products and stuff that you use.
Well, 11 years ago in 2013, I made a decision that I was no longer going to use any antibiotics for the flock. And, you take a little bit of lumps there because some birds have canker, others will get respiratory. But with my pigeons, I can see, like, the weaklings take themselves out of the population. They show like
They told you.
mhm.
they're not being healthy because of the medications. If they're sickly, I lose them, or I don't have to breed from them, or they're going to get lost. So my birds keep getting stronger. Now, the biggest thing for me has been the oregano products. The oregano, I
Mm,
don't know if you guys use it. And I've been promoting one. It's called New Biotic. It's an oregano cinnamon combination. And
okay.
it works about as good as the antibiotics. And it's natural, and it's good for the gut bacteria, and just a tremendous product. I could always, when we put this thing up, I can give you a link where you guys can get it if someone wants to get it. What is that you're showing there? Oh,
This
an
is
oregano?
oregano drops, 100% organic
Yep.
oregano drops
And do
for the
you use it
water.
for your birds? Yeah.
I'm very big on natural products. I use oregano, cinnamon, turmeric,
Excellent.
cumin. I'm very big on natural products.
You know, it's the way to go. And what I did for the first probably 6 or 7 years, 8 years, I was really nervous. I was using a lot of the oregano, and I would use the apple cider vinegar. But then the last few years, I said to myself, well, do my birds need these products to stay healthy? So I pretty much stopped. I don't even use the natural products very much anymore. I do it, you know, here and there, but I'm not so
Here and there.
consistent with it. But
Nah.
it's been 11 years of just building their immune systems,
Yes.
up and taking the weaklings out of the population. I'm not breeding from the weaklings, where a lot of people, if you medicate all the time, you're breeding from the weaklings.
Mhm.
And,
Exactly.
you know, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, me either. I'm kind of the same way with my breeding. Um, I try not to give anything. Maybe a few vitamins here and there as needed because of breeding. But if I don't see nothing wrong, I feel they don't need anything.
Yeah, and
For
I'm
him.
the same. I'm the same way. I mean, I don't do anything anyways, and but yeah, the birds are healthy. I'll go into breeding. I'll vaccinate them for paramyxovirus, salmonella, and a bronchial. It's like a respiratory. It's a 3-in-1 I get from Andrew over at Global. I'll
Yes,
vaccinate them before the breeding, before the race season, and I'll worm them with the moxidectin. I use Quest.
Moxie Dexter. Yeah.
Have you used that? It's the horse. I buy it at Tractor Supply. Quest, the horse vitamin. I mean the horse
Yes,
wormer, and I mix it up. And I did a video on how I mix it and all that. But it's a great. It kills everything, internal and external.
I
Everything
for
dies.
worming I use diatomaceous earth for
Okay.
chickens, the wormer for chickens. I use that,
Yeah,
and it seems to work for me perfect.
I never tried it. I know it'll work and it kills parasites and stuff. I just worry about the birds inhaling it and you inhaling it, because it is like microscopic glass particles.
Yeah,
So
that's why
Mhm.
I
it
use it in
scares
the
me a
feed.
little.
I
You
use
put
it
in
in
the
the
feed?
feed
Oh,
and
okay.
mix it with a little bit of oils.
Oh,
That way,
so
it's not so much in the air.
yeah, it's not getting
But
powdered. Yeah.
I put it in a container, shake it with some oil, and then let it sit, then feed.
Huh.
That way, it's not you're not breathing it in all your pigeons.
Yeah. No,
So,
it makes more sense. I know a lot of people throw it around the lofts, or
oh
you
no,
know, that I think that dust can't be good.
yeah, it's not.
But
It's definitely
I haven't tried it. But I do like the oregano products. I like the apple cider vinegar.
yes.
And there's a product that we use in the racing. It's called Yellow Drops. It's a, oh boy, I'm trying to think of the name of the actual ingredient. It's like aclaflavin, and they use it in aquarium fish and stuff, but it's a antimicrobial. It's not an antibiotic, but we'll give the birds 1 drop during the week, and it kind of wipes out canker and respiratory on the birds. So for the
And
racing
that
birds,
goes directly
yeah,
to the
one
bird.
drop right in the mouth. I usually do it. I didn't do it this year and I flew great, but I would do it like the middle of the week. I would give them the yellow drops, and it's a nice product for, you know, performance pigeons to keep
And
the,
where would you pick that up?
most of the supply houses will sell it. It's all the same stuff. I buy
Okay.
the Herbots brand, but Global would carry it, or and but yellow drops. But if you do, you are, you know, you're competing, whether you're competing with a tipplers or a roller competition, you know, a midweek drop, a yellow drop will keep the respiratory and canker, you know, at bay. It's a
That bay.
good product, and
Okay.
it's not it's an antimicrobial, but it's not an antibiotic.
How do you feel about elderberry?
You know, I never tried it. I know people had good luck with it, you know, with the young bird sicknesses years back, but I never
Mhm.
tried it. I've had good luck with the oregano products over the years.
So
And
you stick to what
yeah,
works for you.
that
Yeah.
seems to have really helped with the young bird sickness, the oregano product.
How do you feel about tipplers tossing, tossing tipplers?
You know, I didn't think they could even home at all, but I hear that, you know, some people can get them to home a bit.
We
So
had actually a tossing competition over here. We started,
really,
and it was 500 tipplers in the sky.
wow.
You got to check out one of the videos on YouTube.
Your feeding program. What is your basically your daily regimen and how you feed your birds? And do you feed corn or no corn?
Yeah, I mean, there's corn in my, like with my breeding birds, I use like I think it's almost 15% breeding mix. It's actually called Champion Versalaga Champion. And but I give them all they want. Like I fill a feeder in the breeding section. So they waste a lot. Like they throw stuff they don't eat, but there's corn in the mix. And
Okay.
but yeah, now my racing birds, they eat predominantly barley. It's just a barley in the husk, like a nice plump barley, and that keeps them very buoyant. They don't gain weight on that. They don't get heavy. So I'm feeding like 75% barley for my racing birds.
Wow.
I'm getting them ready to race in 2 weeks. Their body weight is great. They're nice and light and corky, and they fly.
Nice.
They do amazing speeds when they're nice and light. Nearly everyone sends their birds too heavy to the races, like all the racing pigeon guys. Like not maybe so much now. I've been preaching it for a while, but they send heavy, round, full pigeons to the races, and that's not good. I mean, it's almost like if you ever handle a wild pigeon, there's no weight on that thing. You know, there's no meat, there's no roundness to it, and those things could fly, fly all day. So my birds are very light and buoyant, but I feed like 75% barley, 25% champion mix for the racing, and then I just fill my feeders with the champion mix for the breeders.
And right before the day of the race, how do you feed your birds?
Well, I'm a little
Or
different
how
than
much do
most.
you feed your birds?
See, for short distance, which I consider any race under 6 hours, short distance, I'll keep them right on that barley mix. I won't add any fat seeds. I'm more worried about the body being
Wait,
nice and lightweight. And my birds will fly away from other birds because they're so light. They're not carrying anything extra. And birds only need a little bit of fat to fly a long time. I mean, you guys know what the tip was. They weigh like an ounce. The suckers can fly like 14 hours. There's nothing to them.
yeah,
And that would probably be a good experience for the racing pigeons guys to handle some tipplers and realize, wow, they're light as feather, those things.
yeah.
And so for races like 6 hours and below, I don't do anything special. When we get to the long distance, the day of shipping, I might feed a lot of fat seeds, the safflowers, the hemps, rape, flax. I'm not a peanut. A lot of people use the peanuts. I don't like the peanuts mainly because fanciers overdo it. Peanuts are like pigeon heroin. So instead of when
Yeah,
they should only have one or two, the bird's on their shoulder, they give them a peanut. It's here, they give them peanuts. Like, yeah. So
yeah.
play with peanuts off season, but when you're worried about body weight, you can't be given. It's like us eating hot fudge sundaes all week long. We're probably not gonna, we're not gonna be ready for the competition on Saturday. So
Do you
That's
grit them
right.
up? Do you grit them up?
yeah, minerals are like more important than even the feed. Like my birds, I have every possible mineral, pickstone, brown
Even
mineral
before you
blocks.
race, not to cut you off, but even before the race?
Well, I
No.
don't add fresh minerals like after Tuesday or Wednesday. So they race on Saturday. So when they come home, I'll have all the fresh minerals in front of them, the grits, the
Got you.
minerals, because they replenish that all in one stuff, which is a mix of all the different minerals, the pink minerals, the brown minerals, the pick pots. And then Tuesday or Wednesday, I'll replenish again. Then I don't replenish. I don't remove it. But if you give them the fresh stuff the day of shipping, they'll eat too much. They might eat so much salt, they may dehydrate. So after usually Tuesday, I don't replenish. It's in front
It'll,
of them, but I don't replenish. But the breeders all the time, tons of minerals. It's so
Got you.
important. It's more important than the grain, the minerals. And a lot of people don't give enough of the minerals to the breeding pigeons.
Mm.
I think before shipping them out for race, minerals minimum big time because you don't want them to carry. It's like carrying rocks in a pouch. They're
Yeah,
gonna be too heavy.
I think between the extra weight, if they're getting, fresh grit in their system and a lot of the salt in that, I think they dehydrate everything. They load all
Yeah.
that stuff with salt because they want the pigeons to eat it. So there's all kinds of salt and you don't want them to dehydrate. So I don't replenish them after, say, Tuesday usually. Saturday and Tuesday, they get fresh minerals when they return from the race and then on Tuesday. And the breeders, probably every other day, I'm replenishing the minerals. My brother actually does that. I call him the mineral king. He's always walking around the lofts giving the birds minerals. So he takes care of the minerals.
At least you got a partner that does something, right?
Yeah, he's a huge help. He lives at the lofts, which is good because he'll lock them up at night if we train him, or if they're coming home from a race, he can lock them up. I only go over in the mornings, but he's over there, so he's a huge help, and he's got a good eye, and he's been interested
Great.
about 10 years in the birds. He started late. He's been around them his whole life, but only the last 10, 12 years he's really into it. So he's been a big help
Awesome.
for me.
When it comes to pigeons, right, and the racing, do you believe size plays any kind of like
Yeah, I mean,
you know, does it?
I think bigger pigeons are really hard to condition, like the bigger ones. If they have too much bone, yeah, some of them, I like a medium-sized bird, a medium size, not a lot of meat on them, not a lot of bone. I like them strong, but I like them flexible. Many people select for show quality. They want a big, strong back and big, strong bones, but they're flying, they're not,
Right,
you
right.
know. So I like a very strong but flexible bird, medium size, if at all possible. The big ones, they are usually difficult to maintain their body weight and to condition over the smaller, more buoyant
Cut up
type
pigeon.
birds.
I
I
like
mean,
more or less the Bruce Lee type homes. Very slim, very lanky. I think
That's
they're really great.
That's a good point. Yeah, if you picture that, Bruce. I haven't heard that expression, but the Bruce Lee type homers would be the way to go. They'd be the
Yeah.
ones that are most beneficial. Wow.
have
Mhm.
you have you had any pushback from PETA?
It's funny you said that. Well, not necessarily PETA, but like the Massachusetts MS, it's like the cruelty to animal group.
Mm-hmm.
I was given my birds and I put it on my website. It was Virkon S. It was a disinfectant. And when I went to South Africa, they were putting it in the drinking water of the pigeons, and it was stopping virus from spreading. And they use it in shrimp farming, and the chicken breeders were using it with baby chicks. And I was advocating it because if your birds start to look sick, or they start to go off, you can put like a half teaspoon to the gallon of this Virkon S to the water for like 5 days. I don't make it strong. Well, I had it on my website, and one day the state police and the prevention of cruelty to animal people pulled in the yard because of this. Someone reported me. And I guess you could use all the antibiotics you want and nobody would say a word, but if you do that. So I had to take the information off my website and stuff, but that's the only problem I've really ever had. And it was more or less a scare. They just came in and,
What's your theory about their homing ability?
I don't think we haven't figured it out yet. I know that there's a lot of theories. They have that magnetic tissue at the base of their beak and they use that with like the sun compass, and they can tell the time and they get a direction. And some say that they can hear the oceans, the ultrasonic sounds of the oceans on both coasts. But I don't really think we figured it out. It amazes me too, like a 2-inch little baby salmon will be born in a river and go out to the ocean, and 7 years later will come back to the same river it was born in. I mean, they really
Yeah.
haven't figured it out yet exactly what's going on with a lot of this stuff. And but they have multiple ways, like even pigeons, and Cornell did studies. They covered their eyes so they could only see light. They couldn't see anything else but light. And they took them 200 miles and they landed within 10 feet of the pigeon lofts without their eyes. So
Wow.
it's
Wow.
there's a lot to it. And I think we'll find out more, but they have a lot of backups. Like they have systems and then a backup system and a backup system, and they have a lot of ways to home these things.
Yeah, yeah,
But
definitely.
yeah, they
Mm.
do amazing things. And over the years to see these birds home and come through storms or just lay down amazing
Great,
feats.
great,
It's pretty good. They're really
great stuff.
interesting animal.
How many homers do you keep?
Like most of us, too many. I have about 50 pair of breeders. I've got 60 birds on my old bird race team, and I probably have another 100 that I could sell. I mean, four or 500 birds probably. when it's all said and done. You know, it's a lot. I got a big setup, but it's too many birds, really.
Nice, nice. This is must be a sight. Must be a sight.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta be a sight. Like the kid in the candy store, I would be in there running around.
Yeah.
Platforms, Frank. What platforms they can check you out on?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited about this. I appreciate being asked. I have a YouTube channel with all my methods, about 100 and probably 40 videos there. It's McLaughlin Lofts, McLaughlin Lofts, LOFTS, McLaughlin Lofts, Frank McLaughlin. And my webpage is McLaughlinLofts.com. They can find me there too. And a lot of information, what I do and my theories and methods and all that stuff. So I've been racing the pigeons now for 50 years and having a blast. Had a lot of success, but I appreciate you guys having me tonight.
Thank you, and we
It's a
appreciate
pleasure, my
you.
brother.